In 405 CE, a scholar named Jerome makes a translation error. He's rendering Hebrew scriptures into Latin, the version that will become the Catholic Church's official Bible, when he encounters a peculiar passage in Isaiah. The Hebrew reads Halel ben Shachar, shining one, son of the dawn. It's a taunt against a fallen Babylonian king, dripping with cosmic mockery. Jerome chooses the Latin word Lucifer, morning star, light bringer. He has just named the devil. Except that's not what happens, not for another 1,000 years. Because in 405, nobody reads Isaiah 14 as describing Satan's fall from heaven. Church fathers like Origen and Tertullian are still arguing about whether angels can even sin. The Gospels mention demons, sure, but they're strangely quiet about where demons come from. It's not until the Middle Ages that Christian theologians finally connect Jerome's translation to a rebellious angel, fusing it with another verse, Revelation 12, where a dragon's tail sweeps a third of the stars from heaven. 2 fragments, 7 centuries apart. Now sutured into the story every Western child knows. Lucifer, the beautiful angel who tried to overthrow God and got cast into hell with his followers. Here's the thing that should make you sit up straight. The Bible never tells that story, not once. The phrase fallen angel appears in exactly 0 verses of Jewish or Christian scripture. So where does it come from? Follow me backward through 2,500 years of textual archaeology, and you'll watch an idea mutate like a virus jumping species, changing its meaning, its moral weight, its cosmic implications every time it crosses a cultural border. You'll see Jewish priests, Christian philosophers, and Islamic scholars all grappling with the same poisonous question. If God is all-powerful and all-good, where does evil come from? The answer they keep reaching for, the answer they keep trying to kill and failing, is this. The rebels came from inside heaven's house. And the oldest layer sits in Genesis 6. 4 verses, maddeningly brief. When humans began to multiply on the face of the ground, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. Sons of God. In Hebrew, Bnei Elohim. Now, if you're reading this in 600 BCE as a Jewish scribe fresh from Babylonian exile, you know exactly what these words mean. They're not metaphors. The Bnei Elohim are members of the divine council, the same heavenly court described in Job and Psalms, where Yahweh deliberates with lesser deities. This is standard ancient Near Eastern theology. Every pantheon has a high god presiding over junior divinities. Picture the scene. Divine beings descend. Human women. Offspring called Nephilim, giants, heroes, creatures who blur the boundary between heaven and earth. And then, with brutal swiftness, God sends the flood to wipe the slate clean. But here's what Genesis doesn't tell you. Why the sons of God descend. Are they rebels? Experimenters? Just lustful? The text is silent. It records the act, the consequence. Nothing about motive or rebellion. It's a narrative fragment, a theological unexploded bomb sitting in Israel's foundational text. For 500 years, that bomb ticks quietly. Then Second Temple Judaism picks it up and pulls the pin. Sometime around 300 BCE, an unknown Jewish author writes a book called Warn Enoch. It's a wild, apocalyptic vision, and it does something audacious. It takes those 4 ambiguous verses from Genesis and constructs an entire mythology. In Warn Enoch's version, the sons of God have names. Samyaza, Azazel. 200 watchers descend to Mount Hermon. They're not obeying God, they're defying him, driven by lust for human women. When they take wives and produce the giant Nephilim, it gets worse. These watchers start teaching humanity forbidden knowledge. Azazel teaches metallurgy, how to forge swords and shields. Samyaza teaches enchantments. Others instruct humans in astrology, cosmetics, the cutting of roots. Knowledge that should remain in heaven bleeds into the mortal world. The Nephilim devour everything, turn cannibal, bring violence. The earth groans. God dispatches the archangel Raphael to bind Azazel in the desert, throws the watchers into pits of darkness, and unleashes the flood. The Nephilim's bodies are destroyed. but their disembodied spirits remain, roaming the earth as demons, the origin of all evil. This story explodes through Jewish communities. By the time of Jesus, Worst Enoch is scripture for many Jews, quoted, revered, treated as divinely inspired. The Book of Jubilees retells it. The Dead Sea Scrolls reference it. Early Christians like Jude cite it in the New Testament. For 2 centuries, the Watcher myth is ascendant. It provides a clean answer. Evil doesn't come from God or humanity's inherent weakness. It comes from outside, from divine beings who betrayed their nature and corrupted creation. Sin has an origin story. A catastrophic fall. Then the rabbis start having second thoughts. By 200 CE, Rabbinic Judaism faces a problem. Christians are multiplying. Some are venerating angels, praying to Michael, building elaborate hierarchies, and scattered Jewish sects are doing something worse, treating angels like semi-independent powers, reading Worst Enoch as proof that cosmic beings can act against God's will. The rabbis watch this, and they recoil. This is veering dangerously close to dualism, the Zoroastrian idea that good and evil are separate, equal forces. That is heresy. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, in a text from the Talmudic period, curses anyone who reads sons of God as angels. It's not angels, he insists. It's sons of judges, sons of nobles, powerful human lineages mixing with commoners. The Nephilim are just big humans, nothing supernatural. The Enochian books get quietly shelved. They vanish from Jewish canon. Rabbinic thought redirects the problem inward. Evil isn't caused by fallen angels. It's the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination built into every human heart. Satan becomes not a rebel angel, but a prosecuting attorney in God's court, doing exactly what he's told, testing humanity on God's orders. Judaism, for the most part, closes the door on fallen angels. But Christianity kicks it back open. The early Christians face their own version of the same problem. Where does evil come from? And they have less wiggle room than the rabbis, because Jesus himself talks about Satan falling like lightning, and Paul mentions angels who sinned. The New Testament is maddeningly vague, but it gestures toward something. For 3 centuries, church fathers wrestle with the Watcher story. Justin Martyr, writing around 150 CE, accepts it fully. The Watchers fell through lust. Their demonic offspring corrupt humanity. And this explains why pagan gods are actually demons in disguise. Tertullian agrees. He even tells Christian women to veil themselves in church to avoid tempting any lingering watchers. But then Origen of Alexandria throws a wrench into everything. Writing around 230 CE, Origen proposes a different fall. Angels are purely spiritual beings. They don't have bodies. They can't lust after human women. That's absurd. If angels fell, it had to be through a spiritual sin. Pride, maybe. Intellectual rebellion. The debate fractures Christian theology for centuries. Some bishops cling to the Enochian narrative. Others follow Origen's lead. Then Augustine of Hippo settles it. Around 410 CE, right when Jerome's Latin Bible is spreading, Augustine writes, City of God. His argument is surgical. The Watcher's story is Jewish folklore, not doctrine. The real fall happened before creation, when Lucifer and a third of the angels rebelled out of pride. Satan's sin was envy of God's supremacy, not lust for human flesh. Augustine wins. By the 5th century, Western Christianity pivots. The fall of angels is pre-human, metaphysical, driven by corrupted will. The Enochian books get labeled apocryphal. The sons of God in Genesis get reinterpreted as human lineages, Seth's descendants mixing with Cain's. Except the art refuses to cooperate. Walk into any medieval cathedral, and you'll see them. Angels mid-transformation, wings blackening, faces contorting as they plummet from heaven's ramparts. Gustave Doré's 19th century illustrations for Milton's Paradise Lost become iconic. Angels tumbling through clouds, their beautiful faces twisted with rage and despair as they fall toward the gaping mouth of hell. Ricardo Belver's 1877 Fountain of the Fallen Angel in Madrid depicts Lucifer at the moment of impact. Muscular, defiant, wings still partially intact, wrapped in serpent coils. The statue's pedestal sits exactly 606 meters above sea level. Tourists line up for photos. Here's the fascinating contradiction. Official theology says fallen angels are invisible, incorporeal spirits. But the art insists they have bodies, beautiful bodies that rot into monstrous forms. Medieval and Renaissance painters can't resist. They paint the fall as a visible event, a cosmic battle with Michael casting rebels down while God watches from a throne. Why? Because humans think in images. Abstract theological propositions about corrupted wills and intellectual pride don't move the soul. But a gorgeous angel becoming a demon, wings charring, flesh twisting, that's a story you can see. It's a warning and a tragedy at once. And the visual language starts leaking backward into theology. Theologians begin cataloging demonic hierarchies: Beelzebub, Asmodeus, Baal. Each demon is a fallen angel who once held rank in heaven's armies. Grimoires and demonologies map hell's bureaucracy, mirroring celestial hierarchies. Lucifer becomes hell's king, presiding over a dark court. But here's what's wild. While Christian Europe is building this elaborate system, Islam is telling an entirely different version of the same event. In the Quran, revealed starting around 610 CE, the fall narrative hits differently. Surah after surah recounts it. God creates Adam from clay. Angels are commanded to bow before this new creation. All obey except one. Iblis refuses. The name likely derives from the Greek diabolos, slanderer, but the character is thoroughly Quranic. In Surah 2, God asks Iblis why he won't bow. Iblis replies, "I am better than him. You created me from fire and created him from clay." Pride, jealousy. But here's the twist. God doesn't cast Iblis out in fury. He grants Iblis permission to tempt humanity until Judgment Day. Iblis asks for this role and God agrees. In Surah 38, it's explicit. "By your might, I will surely mislead them all, except your chosen servants." This is not the Christian story. Christian Satan rebels and becomes God's enemy, cast into hell to await final judgment. But in Islamic theology, Iblis remains under God's authority. He's doing exactly what God permits, testing humans, exposing their weaknesses. There's no cosmic dualism here. Even the devil is God's instrument. And unlike Christianity's hardline, fallen angels can never return. Their choice is eternal. Some Islamic scholars suggest the opposite. If Iblis repents, if fallen angels turn back to God, they could theoretically be restored. The debate never settles, but the opening exists. Even more, Harut and Marut, two angels mentioned in Surah 2, descend to earth and teach humans magic, but only after God commands them to test humanity. They warn people not to misuse the knowledge, but people do anyway. These angels fall through obedience to a divine experiment, not rebellion. Same cosmic event, angels descending, corruption spreading, humans suffering, but the moral physics are inverted. Islamic scholars look at the Christian obsession with irredeemable evil and shake their heads. And Christian theologians look at Islamic nuance and see dangerous compromise with evil. The idea mutates again. By the Middle Ages, folklore has had enough of theological hair-splitting. In Ireland, Scandinavia, and Germanic lands, a new story emerges. Not all fallen angels sided with Lucifer or God. Some just didn't fight. They stood neutral during heaven's civil war. God cast them out anyway, not to hell but to earth. They're stranded in the middle realm, too corrupted for heaven, not wicked enough for damnation. They become the fair folk. Fairies, spirits of forests, rivers, crossroads. Sometimes helpful, often tricky, never fully trustworthy. Caesarius of Heisterbach, a 13th century monk, writes about a knight guided by a fallen angel who steers him back to Christian virtue. When the knight discovers his guide's true nature, he's horrified. But the angel insists he's trying to earn his way back to God's grace. In another tale, a neutral angel becomes a nobleman's assistant, refusing payment but asking only that the nobleman donate to the church. This version offers something neither Judaism, Christianity, nor Islam fully provides: gradations. Not every rebellion is equal. Not every fall is final. Some angels are redeemable. Some are simply lost. Protestant reformers hate this. By the 17th century, Puritan theologians are writing frantic treatises insisting fairies are either Catholic superstition or Satan's deception. Belief in neutral angels gets hammered as paganism. The folklore retreats into rural corners, but it never disappears. Because the idea that some falls are recoverable, that cosmic exile doesn't have to be permanent, is too emotionally satisfying to kill. Thomistic philosophy makes the fall of angels into a thought experiment. Thomas Aquinas, writing in the 13th century, asks, how can a purely spiritual being, perfect in intellect, undistorted by bodily desires, choose evil? Humans sin because we're confused, impulsive, driven by physical urges. But angels have no bodies. Their intellects are crystalline. They see truth directly, without the fog of sensory input. So when an angel sins, it can't be from ignorance or passion. It must be pure will. Lucifer doesn't misunderstand his position in the cosmic order. He sees it perfectly and chooses to reject it. This is what makes angelic sin unforgivable. It's not a mistake. It's a metaphysical revolt, a conscious decision to invert the good. Henry of Ghent pushes back. What if evil will itself distorts reasoning? What if the angel's first bad choice clouds their subsequent judgment, trapping them in a cascade of corruption? For medieval philosophers, this isn't just abstract speculation. It's a tool for understanding human moral failure. If we can explain how a perfect being falls, maybe we can trace the pathways of our own stumbles. The fall of angels becomes a mirror for examining free will, the origins of evil, and the terrifying possibility that intelligence alone doesn't guarantee virtue. This scholastic wrestling match produces shelves of dense Latin texts that almost nobody reads today, but it shapes how the West thinks about evil for the next 500 years, not as an external corruption, the Enochian model, but as a catastrophic misuse of freedom. And then John Milton writes Paradise Lost. Milton's 1667 epic poem does something no theologian or church council managed. It makes the devil sympathetic. Not righteous, Milton is a devout Christian, but compelling. His Lucifer is beautiful, eloquent, genuinely wounded by what he sees as tyranny. Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven becomes one of English literature's most quoted lines, because it captures the seductive logic of rebellion. God's authority in Milton's Satan's telling isn't legitimate. It's imposed by raw power. The other angels should be free, autonomous, choosing their allegiance rather than groveling in enforced worship. Of course, Milton undercuts this by showing Satan's pride curdling into spite, his rhetoric revealed as self-deception. By the poem's end, Satan is a serpent, degraded and pathetic. But the damage is done. Readers for 350 years have found Satan more interesting than the obedient angels, more human than the remote, inscrutable God. Romantic poets like Byron and Shelley run with it. The fallen angel becomes the Byronic hero, the rebel against cosmic injustice. By the 19th century, Alfred de Vigny is writing poems about a female angel who falls from grace trying to comfort Lucifer. Sympathy for the devil becomes a legitimate literary tradition. Fast forward to 2024. Lucifer gets his own TV show where he runs a nightclub in Los Angeles, solves crimes, and broods about daddy issues. Tom Ellis plays him as charming, wounded, desperate for validation. The show runs 6 seasons. In Supernatural, angels are bureaucratic drones. The interesting ones are always the rebels, Castiel, Anna, even Lucifer in his more charismatic moments. Video games put players in the role of fallen angels leading rebellions, Darksiders, or navigating the politics of hell, Helltaker. The archetype has fully flipped. The rebel is the protagonist, heaven's obedience is portrayed as sterile conformity, and the fall is reframed as liberation. This would horrify Augustine. It would baffle the rabbis who excised one Enoch from Jewish canon. But it reveals something true about the idea's tenacity. The fall of angels is ultimately a story about freedom. What it costs, what it enables, and whether the price is worth paying. So here's where we land. 2,500 years after Genesis 6 was written, the rabbis tried to bury the idea. It came back in folklore. Augustine tried to make it metaphysical and pre-human. Artists insisted on painting it as visual spectacle. Islam tried to subordinate it to God's sovereignty. Sufis turned it into a mystical parable about divine love. Protestant reformers tried to strip it of Catholic superstition. It migrated into secular literature and became the archetype of the anti-hero. Every culture that touches this story transforms it to solve their particular theological crisis. The Watchers explain why forbidden knowledge corrupts. Lucifer's pride explains how evil emerges from free will. Iblis's test explains why humans suffer. Neutral angels explain why the world feels morally ambiguous rather than starkly divided into good and evil. And every time authorities declare the matter settled, the idea mutates and resurfaces. Demonologies get written in the Renaissance. Gothic novels resurrected in the 1800s. Hollywood franchises make it blockbuster material. Because the question it tries to answer, where does evil come from, is the question no theology has ever fully resolved. If God is omnipotent and good, evil shouldn't exist. But it does. Something has to explain the gap. Fallen angels fill that gap. They're the buffer between divine perfection and human suffering. They let believers say, evil isn't God's fault, and it's not entirely ours either. There was a catastrophe, a cosmic rupture, and we're living in its fallout. Is that true? Depends on your theology. But it's emotionally true in a way that pure abstraction never is. It gives evil a face, a story, a beginning. It makes the world's darkness feel less like a cruel joke and more like a tragedy, something that happened rather than something intrinsic to existence. Jerome's translation error in 405 CE didn't create Lucifer, but it gave a name to something humans were already trying to articulate: the terrible beauty of the rebel, the one who saw paradise and walked away. And 1,600 years later, we're still telling that story, still watching angels fall, still wondering if they could ever rise again. The idea that wouldn't die because we need it too much to let it go.